Welcome everyone to this week's lesson on using dimensions and text in Envisioneer. My name is Russell and I'll be your host for today's webinar. The main topics that we're going to cover today include dimension settings, adding dimensions and adding text, and descriptive text and leaders as well. After the formal portion of the presentation, there will be time for a question and answer session. So please feel free to enter questions throughout the course of the webinar, and I will address those at the end of the formal presentation. So let's get started. When it comes to adding dimensions and text in Envisioneer, you have a number of tools at your disposal, both in model workspace and in worksheets. As you can see on my screen here, I have a completed residential project modeled, and I'm ready to start preparing some construction documents for that project. So before I start inserting smart views of this model into worksheets, I'm going to add some dimensions and notes in model space first. So let's go to our 2D plan view in model space. And the first tools that I want to show you are the automatic dimension tools that are available for use on floor plans. So we access those tools up here under the Tools drop-down menu. And under Dimensions, you can see these first two options here, Auto Exterior Dimensions and Auto Interior Dimension. And again, these are only available here in model space. You won't find these in worksheet views. And before we go ahead and put these into use, let's just have a look at how we're going to control the settings for these. So we go to Settings, Dimension Settings. And when we open this dialog here, you can see there are two tabs, one for each. By default, the Exterior Auto Dimensions tab here is enabled. And also beside that, we have the Interior Auto Dimensions tab. So let's have a look at Exterior Auto Dimensions settings first. So up at the top here, you see we have the option to choose what we want to include dimension strings for. So by default, we have the overall dimensions. A string for those is chosen. Another for projections around the perimeter of the building. And also we have openings selected by default. You can see there are also options here for interior walls if you wanted to use this to dimension your interior walls, and also to dimension any angled walls. The next section we want to look at here is our dimension line distances. So the first one here, dimension line spacing, is the space between different dimension strings. So right now that is set at 2 feet, and that would be equivalent to 2 feet at a 1/4 inch scale, which is the default scale for the workspace. Below that, we have a dimension offset setting, which is right now set at 4 feet, and that is showing us here in this diagram. That's the distance here from the exterior edge of the building to the first dimension string. So again, you could change either of these values as you like to adjust that for your own preferences. The next setting we have here is our extension lines. You can see this first option here is enabled by default, where our extension lines are going to come down almost to the edge of our building, just a slight offset. And then option number 2 here, if we wanted to choose that, all of the extension lines are going to be at a fixed set distance determined by the most exterior line there. The next settings we have available in this dialog box here are our openings. And again, we have 2 settings to choose from. This first one that's currently enabled, that is going to dimension to the center line of any openings. And then your second option here would be to dimension the actual openings and the space on either side. Next, we're going to move to the right side of the dialog box up top here, end condition. So what we're telling it here is where do we want the dimension to be taken from. Do we want it to be taken to the most exterior surface of the veneer? Do we want it to be taken to the edge of the core or the edge of the stud if it was a wood stud or metal stud building? If it was concrete wall, it would be the exterior edge of the concrete. Do we want it to be taken to the center of the structural core or the interior of the core? These are all options we can choose depending how we like our drawings to be dimensioned and who they're being created for. And of course, we can also choose to dimension to the interior surface if we like. So in this case, I am going to choose to dimension to the exterior core. In this case. And then you can see there's one other setting available down here in the bottom right of the dialog is interior walls. And again, it's the same set of choices as we just went through above. And that would be contingent on if you had activated this interior walls checkbox. So that completes our settings for the exterior auto dimensions. So let's now just go in and have a look at interior auto dimensions. So you can see in here what we're choosing is, again, where do we want to dimension to? Do we want to dimension to our surfaces, a leading edge and trailing edge of the interior face of, say, drywall, if it was interior wood stud wall with drywall on either side, or do we want it to dimension to that core, to that wood stud framing on either side? Or we can also choose the option of dimensioning right to the center if that's what we want to do, if that's our preferred convention for dimensioning interior partition walls. And then the other setting you have available at your disposal here is this one over here on its own, which is whether or not we want it to ignore the wall dimension. So if this box is checked, which it is right now, that means it's not going to tell us the thickness of the wall between our leading edge and trailing edge. If we uncheck this, it is going to add a dimension in for the thickness of the wall, be it to the veneer or to the core, depending on what you choose there. So in this case, I am going to choose to dimension to the core on either side. And then there's one last thing to look at here in this dimension settings dialog box before we go ahead and click OK, and that's to look at the style of our dimension. So I'm going to click this current style button in the top left. And you can see in here there are a number of preset dimension styles in this list here to choose from, and you can see that in the preview window below that's changing the appearance of these. And these are the preset ones. If you want, you can just right click here and you could add your own dimension style. You can also come in here and you can edit any of these dimension styles. So whether you add or edit, you're going to open up this dimension style properties dialog box, where again you have a number of options to set. You can set the type of arrow that you want, whether you want a tick, a dot, an arrow of some kind. You also have a number of dimension specifications, so you can choose the extension offset, you can choose the extension lap, the dimension lap, and the tick width, and all of these are defined over here in this diagram. There are corresponding letters A, B, C, D for each of those items. You can set those to a specific distance to adjust the default settings if you want. The next thing that we're going to look at, as there are several tabs in here, we're going to look at the leader tab here. Again, this is going to give you the option to choose which kind of arrow type you want at the end of your leader, if you want a tick, dot, or arrow, and which kind. And again, down below, you can see here, you can set the arrow length, the thickness, and the landing gap to the text. The next tab you can set in here has to do with the text itself. You can choose what the vertical text position is. Have some choices in there. You also can set the horizontal text position if it's centered or if it's set at a specific distance from one end or the other. If it was a number of very small dimensions together, this would come in handy to position the text so it's more legible. You also have this option here to override the system settings for unit precision and set your own preferences just for dimensions as far as the precision of those. There's one other thing to look at here in the text tab, which is the text style itself, which is currently set here to dimensions. If we click on this button, again, you're going to see that we're going to get a number of preset options here for the text style. And again, here, if we want to go in deeper, we can come in here and we can also edit this style of text itself. We can rename it. We can change the font. We can change the style of font. We can change the height of the font, and we can change the color. For today, I'm just going to leave these in the preset settings, and let's just have one last look at this line styles tab here. So again, in here, we can choose the line style for our dimension lines, our extension lines, and our arrows and our ticks. So just going to exit out of these dialogues. So we've completed all of our dimension settings. So we're now ready to go ahead and click OK and use these automated tools to add some dimensions to our plan view in model space. So why don't we first use the auto exterior dimensions? And it's as simple as coming up to the Tools tab here, going to the Dimensions drop-down and choosing Auto Exterior Dimensions from the menu. One click, and as you can see, that has added dimensions all around the perimeter of this building. So you can see that there are 3 dimension strings on each side, the most exterior being the overall dimension. So if we zoom in here, let's have a closer look at this side. Here's our overall dimension on this side. The next dimension string in here is showing me the different projections of the building at different points as they come out. And then the most interior set here is giving me, here's a center line of my opening, and then it's telling me the distance from there to my projection on this side, and again to the center of this next opening over here. So that is the auto exterior dimensions tool, using pretty much the automatic settings. And there's one thing that I'm noticing on here that is missing from this, which is I don't have any aligned dimensions for this angled garage portion here. So I can change that, I can fix that. I'm going to go back into my settings, dimension settings, and look at my exterior auto dimensions. And I see here again, if you remember, I have this option to turn it on for angled walls. So I'm going to do that by clicking that checkbox, and I'm going to click OK. It doesn't automatically update. I need to run the tool again. So I'm going to come back up here and run this tool again. It's going to ask me if I'm sure I want to do this, because it will overwrite the existing dimensions, and I'm going to click yes. And you can see there that added in dimensions for those angled portions of that garage. So I'm pretty happy with that, though there's a couple of other things that I'm noticing, which is that this driveway and this path and these plants here, it's compromising a little bit the legibility of my dimensions. I see it's hard to read these ones down here by these plants. So maybe I'm going to come into my view filter, and I'm going to choose to go into my elements on terrain tab and turn everything off, just to make that easier to read. You can see that cleaned up a lot of that. It's much easier to read here now. There's a couple of other things that I might like to adjust is one is that this distance here from the building to the first dimension string, I might want to increase that. Again, just a preference thing. And the other thing is that maybe after all, I might decide I want to change the way that it's dimensioning these windows. So again, I'm going to come back in here to my dimension settings. On my exterior auto dimensions tab, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change this dimension offset, which is the distance from the edge of the building to the first string. I'm going to double that up to 8 feet to increase that. And then I'm going to come down to the openings area here, and I'm going to change from it being on center to actually dimensioning those openings. And then you can see in here that there's one other option here, which is to check this box here, add opening height after width. So I can choose if I want to include the opening height as well as just the width of that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to activate that checkbox. And you can see here in this drop down menu, I could choose different ways of displaying that on multiple lines above and below each other with a cross between a by symbol, say this by that dimension, a dash or a forward slash, depending on your conventions and preferences, how you like to do things. I'm going to keep it as a cross or a by symbol. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click OK. Again, it doesn't automatically update. I have to come back in here and run the tool again and tell it, yes, I do want to overwrite. And you can see how that automatically updated everything. It pushed this first string out from my building, so I have more space in here if I wanted to come in and add some notes. You can see also in terms of how it's dimensioning openings. If I zoom in here, for instance, on this window, you can see that it's now dimensioning the opening itself as opposed to on center as it was dimensioning before. And you can see that it's giving me the width by the height for that opening, in this case, a window. So I'm just going to zoom out again. And you see when I hit zoom extents now, because I have my terrain turned off, I'm just seeing my exterior dimensions in my plan. So I'm happy now with the way that the exterior dimensions are reading. So I want to move on to look at how to use our interior auto dimension tool. So we find that in the same place up here in the tools menu at the top of the screen, and we choose auto interior dimensions. The way this tool works is you can see it's changed my cursor again, and there's a cross there. I'm just going to zoom in on this portion of the house so we can see a little better here. So the way this works is I'm going to click once on the outside of a wall where I want dimensions of the space on the other side, and I'm going to drag this across as many walls, depending on which rooms I want dimensions for. And when I get to the other end, I'm going to left click again. And you can see by crossing all those walls, that created for me dimensions for every space that that line crossed over. So it created dimensions in each of these rooms here. So that's the way the auto interior dimension tool works. It only works with walls. It's not going to work on things like the cabinets and things here. There are other dimensioning tools I'm going to show you shortly that we use to manually dimension elements of that nature. The auto interior tool is really intended for use on walls. So I'm just going to erase those markups, and my tool is still active. And I'm going to come out here and show you how this will also work over here in the garage, even though it's angled. I'm going to turn my angle snap on, and so my first dimension string I want here, I want to get the interior dimensions of this garage. So I'm going to click just outside in between the two garage doors here. I'm going to come across and get to the outside of the other wall on the back side of the garage. And I'm going to click again, and you see that that added that dimension right through there. And then I'm going to add one more dimension string coming the other way across the garage. Again, starting outside on one side of the wall and coming through to the outside on the other side. And presto, I now have dimensions added for my garage. So the next thing we're going to look at is some of the other manual dimensioning tools that you have at your disposal here in Model Space. So again, if we open up our Tools Dimensions menu, you can see that we have linear dimensions and aligned dimension and angular dimensions as well. So let's start with a linear dimension. So for instance, if I wanted to dimension the cabinetry here in this kitchen, I wanted to know what this space, this distance is between this face of the cabinets and then this opposing face over here. So I'm going to come into my corner and get my tracking mark. I'm going to come across to the other corner and I'm going to click again. And you can see that created a dimension right there. Same goes if I wanted to run the dimension to get the length of the cabinets here. Again, simple as activating that tool and clicking on other elements. So this gives you the ability to dimension things other than walls. You can also use this to dimension individual segments between walls if you wanted to as well. You can come across here and dimension to the core of that wall, for instance. So depending on where you snap and what your snap points are, it's going to produce different dimensions. So let's have a look at some of the other tools we have up here. We have the aligned dimension. Now this is a very handy tool, for instance, in a case like this where we have this angled garage here that's not on the orthogonal up and down, X, Y, east, west, north, south grid. It's off on a tilted angle. So if I wanted to get the dimension from this corner here to this corner, that's something that my automatic dimensions isn't producing. I can just come in here and click to get my snap point. I've released. I'm not holding down the left mouse button. I now come back to this corner. I click again and drag out, and you can see it's aligned to the wall. So whatever the snapping line is, it's going to project the dimension based on where you're snapping. So a very handy tool for dimensioning angled elements in your building. Similarly, we could also use the angular dimension tool if we wanted to get an angle dimension. So if I wanted to know and annotate this angle here, so if I wanted to get this interior angle here, this wall, what's the angle between those two? I can use my angular dimension tool. Just come back up here and choose that again. And so I start by finding the meeting point of the angle, the interior corner. I click once, and then I come up somewhere on the line in one of the directions. I click again, and then I come down to the line in the other direction that defines the angle, and I left click again. And you can see, depending to which side I drag my cursor, I could dimension, I know it's 240 degrees on this side, or it's 120 degrees on the interior of the angle. So again, here in Model Space, you can see you have a number of automatic and manual dimensioning tools that are very handy for annotating your floor plans before you go and take them and place them into worksheet space. We also have some text tools available to us here in model space that we might want to take advantage of before we go and insert this into a worksheet. So the first tool that I want to look at in terms of text tools would be perhaps I want to add some room labels. So I'm going to show you two different ways that we can do this. So the first would be, we're going to go to back up to our tools drop-down menu, and you can see here just above dimensions we have a text option, and we're going to open that up. So the first thing we need to do is we need to set our text style. So again, you can see similar to before, when we were in dimension settings, you have all these options of different preset styles. You can edit them at will. I'm going to leave this as notes. The next thing to call your attention to is on the right-hand side here, you can see there's a list of predefined labels that I'm just scrolling through right now. So I see a bedroom label here that'll be handy to use, and there's two ways I can get this predefined label into the text editor window here. I can come down here and click on this arrow button below, and that adds it in. And I'll just delete that just to show you that you can also double click on any label and it will automatically be added into the text editor window. You also can just come in here and click with your cursor and create or modify text. For instance, I'll change this to bedroom number 1, and I'll just call your attention to one other item in here. Is there's this import button here. If you had a TXT file with lots of text that you wanted to add, might apply more in worksheet view where you're adding several notes, you could select this button and that would take you out to a file navigator where you could choose a file to import, and that would populate this text editor window. So I'm happy with this for now. I'm just going to come down here in the bottom corner beside the OK button and enable this multiple text insert option just to show you how that works. Allows you to repeat this command multiple times. So I'll come in here and add a label, and you see that opens this box right back up again if there was somewhere that I wanted to add another label to. In this case, I don't, so I'm just going to go ahead and click cancel and edit out of here. And just before we move on to our worksheets, there is one other dimension tool available to you under a different menu here under this analyze option under the tools menu. You can see here, and again, under a submenu under schedules, we can use this room region by room or by picking points. In this case, I'm going to choose by room. You can use this tool, and what this is going to do is it's going to give you the ability to measure a room. So you can choose here to display a name. You can choose to tell it which what you want to display. So for instance, if I wanted to dimension my room and I wanted to show my area and the perimeter of that room, I could also choose the volume. There's a number of other fields down here that relates more to schedules that'll be covered in another upcoming webinar. I click on that and I choose OK, and then I just go in and you see on my cursor, I just choose which room I want that added to. And you see it's gone ahead and it's added in there a name for me, it's given me the area, and it's given me the perimeter. So there's another automatic labeling and dimensioning tool that's available to you in model space. And then there's one other dimensioning tool that I wanted to bring to your attention, which is this room dimensions tool. And now why don't we go ahead and we'll use this up here in our bedroom number 1 up in the upper left corner. So to use this tool, you left click in one corner, you drag straight along a wall to another corner, and then you drag, in this case I'm dragging left across to the other corner. And what this is doing is it's measuring the dimensions of this room. As you can see, this text is editable in here, so if I wanted to change this to round it off to 14'6" by 10'6", and I can choose in which order I want it to display, depending width by length or length by width. I can change the dimension style if I want. I'm happy with this as it is, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And you can see again that inserts the text in the middle of the room. So another way of dimensioning your room if you prefer that to dimension strings. Just point out one other handy feature of this tool is if you double click on it, it's going to open up the text editor window, again, where you could make any edits or changes. If, for instance, I hadn't already labeled it as bedroom number 1, I could come in here and add that text and just hit return, and I get a 2-line text, and you could see it would place that text in the middle of the room. So another quick and handy way in model space to add text labels and dimensions. There is one other text tool just to look at quickly in here. We've already reviewed the regular text tool. We're just going to have a quick look at the text with leader tool. So if I wanted to label something with a leader, for instance, let's say I wanted to just annotate my kitchen island. I just type that in directly into the text editor window. If there was a label here in the predefined list that applied, I could choose that. I'm going to uncheck my multiple text insert box, go ahead, click OK. One more step this time, you'll notice in the commander window down on the left here, it's telling me where do I want to insert, pick my first insertion point. So I click once to say where I want it to insert, I click again, and then I click a third time to define that edge of the leader. And it's easy enough just to come in here, and if it's slightly off, just move that down, fix that up. So that covers all of our text and dimensioning tools that are available to use in our model space. So let's move on to see what's available and at our disposal in worksheet space. So I'm just going to switch to this number 3 details worksheet here, where you can see I've pre-inserted a section view for us to use for this exercise. We covered inserting smart views a couple weeks back, so if you needed instructions on that, you could always go to the webinar archive to review that workflow. So the first thing to call to your attention here in worksheet space that's a big difference when we look at our tools, whether we look at the tool tab here or under our tool menu, under dimensions, you see we don't have access to the automatic interior and automatic exterior dimension. So for floor plans, really the ideal is you want to take advantage of those tools in model space before you come and insert into worksheet space. So you don't have access to those tools here, just to bring that to your attention. Everything in here in terms of dimensioning is manual dimensioning tools. So same set of tools here. We have our linear dimensions we can use. So for instance, on this section, if I wanted to be able to dimension the height of this window here, click once, click again, drag out your extension line. Similarly, if I wanted to give the height from the floor to the sill, click once, click twice, drag out. You can see, so that is the linear dimension tool. Again, in here, we have access again to our line dimension tool. So again, this would come in very handy if I wanted to know I just have to disable my angle snap first in this case, because it's not following a prescribed angle. So again, if I wanted to dimension the actual length of this roof here, I would just click one end, click the other, and drag up, and you can see it's giving me that dimension along that line, as opposed to, you see, if I use the linear dimension tool and click those two corners, it's going to drag me up a straight dimension, which may also be helpful. I may want both. So just to show you that you have the option to dimension along an angle for roofs and other elements, walls of that nature. Again, we have our angular dimension tool up here. If I wanted to come in here and I needed to dimension this interior angle, click once at the meeting point, click a second time on the line, click a third time on the other line to define the angle. Again, drag in the direction you want. Again, you can see there that gave me that's a 95-degree angle there inside of the meeting there of the wall and the ceiling. So those are the main dimensioning tools that you have available at your disposal in worksheet view. So now let's go ahead and have a look at the text tools available. So again, first I'll start by showing that we do have access to these tools here on the Tools tab in Worksheet space. And again, they're also available here under the Tools menu, Text. For one, so you can see here, regular text tool, and then you can see the big difference here that we have access to in Worksheet view that we don't have access to in Model Space is descriptive text. I'm going to show you that in a minute. And similarly with leaders, regular text with leader and a description with leader. So we're going to do an example of each one of these. So let's start with our regular text tool. So again, this opens up our text dialog. You can see I can choose my text style here. So in this case, I'm going to choose headings because I want to create a title heading for my section. So I'm going to come into my text editor window and I'm going to type in section. You can see I can easily highlight that. I can underline it. I can make it bold if I want. I can change the size here if I want. I can change the color if I want. I could change the justification if I had multiple lines of text and I wanted it to be centered or justified to the right. Again, I do have access to my predefined labels on the right-hand side here. I have my import text button if I had a bunch of text to import, and the multiple text insert option. I'm just going to show you one other handy feature here is if I hit return at the end of section, then if I changed my style, let's say to dimensions, and you notice that changed the sizes, I could now come in here and I could put my next line of text could be using a different text style. So I could have, say, my scale, for instance, reading at 1/4 inch equals a foot. I could change all this to right justification. Go ahead and click OK. And you can see I can insert that. And there I can have 2 lines of text I want. So above and below the line. And again, I could play with that a lot more to pretty that up and clean that up, but you get the idea. The next text tool we have available here in worksheet view is our description or our descriptive text tool. So this is very handy and can save you a lot of time in labeling your drawings, labeling the elements of your drawings, because most of them you would have inserted have a name that comes directly from the catalog. So if I select this tool, and for instance, if I come down here and I click on the footing, let's say, and it's made a selection because I have something attached. You can see there's a preview there attached to my cursor. And I can come in here now and I can place that text wherever I want. So you can see this is a predefined name that's coming directly out of the catalog, this 1 foot by 2 foot rectangular solid strip footing. Again, if I click on this, you can see on the right-hand side of the screen here in the Object Properties panel that I can change this. I can change the font. I can change the height of the text. I can change the color. I can give it a background if I want. I can also change the contents. I can pull this up, and if I want to modify that, add to it, I just click on that button there beside the contents, and that would allow me to change that. For today, I'm just going to leave it. So we have a couple of other text tools available here. We have our regular leader. Works the same way as it did when we use it in model space. So in this case, let's say I want to label the asphalt shingles on my roof. I type that label in to my text editor window. I set everything the way I want in terms of style and size, etc. Click OK. Again, it's a 3-click process. I click first to define where the arrowhead's going to lie. I click next to define the angle. I click again to determine how far away I want the text, and there it inserts that text at the end of the leader. Again, one of the great advantages here in worksheet space is that you have access to these descriptive text tools. So this description with leader tool, similar to the descriptive text, allows me to click on an item. For instance, this post here, again, it's asking me to define the insertion point for the arrow, a 3-click process. So I second click, third click, and again, that's automatically inserted the predefined label of that item. So you can save yourself a lot of time labeling your drawings here in worksheet space using the descriptive text tools. So we've now covered all of the dimension and text tools that are available here in worksheet view and in model space. There is just one other item, maybe I'll just show you really quickly in terms of annotating drawings here in workspace, in worksheet space, in case you missed it in a recent webinar. Just show you, I pre-created this elevation here on this elevation worksheet just to show you that when you go and insert elevations and sections, you can choose to include datum lines and datum marks for those elevations and sections. So you can see this information here. I'm just circling it to bring it to your attention. And then I'll just zoom in here to show you. So on the left side, just the way I have it set up, you can see here I have all my height reference marks. And then on the right side of the elevation, it's telling me what those refer to. So ground level, wall, different roof ridge lines. So another handy annotation tool. I won't cover this in detail today because it was recently covered in another webinar, and it will be being covered again in another webinar on worksheet tools that we have coming up later this fall. So just to show you, that's another option for labeling your drawings in worksheet space. So this does conclude the formal portion of the presentation today. I'm going to do a quick recap of the lesson here shortly. This would be a good time if you do have any questions on today's subject material to please go ahead and type those in now in the GoToMeeting panel, and I'll get to those as soon as I finish up this quick recap. Let's just return to model space here. So as we've learned today, that it's quite simple and quick to add dimensions and text in both model view and worksheet view. In Envisioneer, in model view, you have the ability to take advantage of the auto interior and auto exterior dimensions, which is a very helpful, fast way to get dimensions onto your drawing. You have the ability to adjust the settings of those. Under dimension settings, you can adjust your settings for exterior and interior auto dimensions. There's all kinds of settings in there. You can control how they're going to appear when they insert on the sheet. You also have access to a number of manual dimension tools here in model view. You have linear, aligned, and angular dimension. Those are also available to you in worksheet space. You have your room dimensions tool that we went through how to use that. You also have under the tools, analyze schedules, room region tool, the ability to insert area, perimeter, and volume of any given room, and that information can be linked to your schedules you're generating. Again, we're going to cover that schedules more in depth in a webinar upcoming in the near future. We also have the ability to add text here in model space using our text tool and our text with leader tool. Again, just to show the differences in worksheet view, here in our tools, we don't have access to the automatic dimension tools, but we have access to all of these other manual dimensioning tools. And again, the big advantage here in worksheet space with text is you have descriptive text and descriptive leaders with text, as well as regular text and regular leaders with text. So there's a quick recap of what we covered. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up the question panel to see if there are indeed any questions that have come in already. And if not, if you're still waiting, please do go ahead now and submit any questions that you may have. It looks like we've got a handful in here. So let me get to those. So first question, if I was to add some short notes to a drawing, do I type in text and click on the drawing where I want to place them? Yeah, so let's just quickly review that text tool just to give you the workflow of how it works one more time. So I'll just do it here in worksheet space since this is where we already are. So I come in and I choose my text tool. I type in here whatever I want to type into the text editor, or I import text, or I choose a label from the list here and I enter that into the window, and then I click OK. And then once I've typed in what I want to place, I come in here and I place it. So that answers the first question. So let's just go ahead and get to our next question. I see that the interior dimensions did not insert the partition stud dimension. That is correct, and that's because of a choice I made when I was setting up the interior setting. So if I come back quickly to the model workspace and I look at my interior dimensioning tools. So let's come back to this same area where we were working before. So now if I was to come into my dimension settings again and look at my interior auto dimensions. And if I uncheck this box here, this is the key. This is the magic box in this case. I just want to highlight. So this ignore wall dimensions box, I had checked that. So if I now choose to uncheck that and click OK, and now when I use my tool, you're going to see when I run this tool now, it is going to add the thicknesses of the stud wall themselves, or wherever you had defined it to. So you can see there, we zoom in, I've got my room dimension from stud to stud. I've got my thickness of my stud here. I know this is a 2x6 wall, and again, this is a 2x6 interior wall. So that's how you can enable showing those dimensions if you want to, if that's your common practice. Some people prefer to just specify that in the notes or using text and leaders, but if you like to actually dimension your walls, that's how you would show the thickness of the walls, and be it to the core, or again, just to show you, just to recap that, if we come back into dimension settings, you could choose for that to be to the leading edge and trailing edge, in which case would go from the veneers instead of the core. And if we did that, and if we run the same tool again, I'll just show you the difference that makes. So if I now run that tool down here, you can see that it's showing me the overall thickness of my exterior wall here, 7 3/4, and the overall thickness of my interior partition wall, which is adding the drywall on either side in this case. So that's how you would adjust your dimension settings to enable allowing it to show the thickness of your wall, if that's what you wanted to do. I'm just going to jump back in here and have a look at the next question, see if there's another question in here. Just scrolling through the list. Oh, the only other question in here is the webinar going to start soon? And it's already started, so hopefully you did manage to get through the wait period at the beginning there, and you stayed with us for the duration of the webinar. Thanks for all your questions. It doesn't look like we've got any more coming in. I'm just gonna leave that option open to type in any last minute questions. Just a quick summary recap here at the end to remind you that once we are completed the webinar today, there will be an email sent out to all of you who've attended with a PDF booklet that recaps the information covered today. And the recording of this webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, as well as to the webinar archive section of the website within the next couple of days. So you can always return there to watch it again if there's anything you missed or something you want to revisit. And please do feel free to always send in your questions to our support department or to call into our support department, which all of that contact information is available on our website, cadsoft.com. I'm just going to see if there are any other last questions coming in. Doesn't look like it, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up here, and thank you very much for joining us today. I hope it was helpful, and we'll see you next week.